Every morning, the sidewalk belonged to Mia and Layla. They walked to school in perfect step, their laughter bouncing off the brick walls of the neighborhood. It was a rhythm they had perfected over years, a shared language of inside jokes and unspoken understanding. By lunch, the routine shifted to the cafeteria bench. They traded apple slices for crackers, heads bent close together, whispering secrets that never left that small circle. No one else was invited into that space. When the final bell rang, the day did not end. They sprinted to the park, boots thudding against the dirt path, chasing each other through the trees until the game of tag became a blur of motion. They played until the streetlights flickered to life, casting long, dancing shadows across the grass. Their classmates watched them from the sidelines, often pointing and calling them the perfect pair. Beyond the shared laughter and the games of tag, Layla held onto one constant companion. It was a worn, leather-bound sketchbook that never left her side. She carried it like a heavy secret, tucked firmly under her arm or pressed against her chest. When she opened it, the world around her seemed to dim. The pages were a gallery of her private imagination. She had spent months filling them, treating every single sheet like a fragile, living treasure. There were intricate castles with spiraling towers that seemed to defy gravity, and fields of neon flowers that looked ready to bloom right off the paper. On one page, she had drawn stars that caught the light, shimmering against the dark ink as if they were burning in deep space. She turned the pages with deliberate, slow movements, her fingertips tracing the edges of the drawings to avoid smudging the graphite. She knew the location of every line, every shadow, and every hidden detail. It was not just a book, it was a map of her mind, a collection of everything she found beautiful. She guarded it with a quiet intensity, shielding the pages from the wind. To Layla, the book was the most important thing she owned, a fragile archive of her own dreams. One sunny afternoon, the living room became their private arena. The air was thick with the sound of their laughter and the rapid, uneven thumping of their feet against the floorboards. They chased each other around the sofa, weaving through the furniture with practiced ease. Mia took the lead, her momentum carrying her toward the center of the room. She pivoted sharply to dodge Layla, but her shoulder clipped the edge of the heavy oak table. The impact sent a tremor through the wood. The sketchbook, resting precariously near the corner, slid off the polished surface. It hit the floor with a sharp, sickening crack that cut through the noise of the chase. Layla lunged forward, fingers outstretched, but she was a fraction of a second too late. The book landed face down, the spine buckling under the force of the fall. As Layla pulled it open, the damage was immediate. A jagged, uneven tear ripped through the center of her latest masterpiece, a vibrant sunset over a mountain range. The paper hung in two pieces. The room went deathly quiet. The joy of the chase evaporated, replaced by the harsh, sudden reality of the ruined page. Layla stared down at the jagged edge. Layla remained motionless, her fingers hovering over the torn paper. Her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. She looked up, her eyes shimmering with sudden, hot tears that threatened to spill. "Mia, you broke it," she whispered. The words were thin, trembling, and carried the weight of a final judgment. Mia stood by the table, her pulse hammering against her ribs. She saw the jagged tear, but the sting of being blamed flared up instantly, hotter than any regret. She felt the heat rise in her cheeks. "It was just an accident," Mia snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut the air. She crossed her arms tightly, locking her body against the room. "You should not have left it on the edge." The accusation hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Layla did not argue. She simply closed the book. The sound of the cover hitting the pages echoed like a door slamming shut. Mia turned on her heel, her face burning with a defensive, hollow anger. The door swung open and clicked shut behind her, leaving Layla alone in the silence, the fractured remains of her work held tight against her chest. The next morning, the classroom felt different. The air was thin and cold. Mia walked to her desk, her gaze fixed firmly on the floorboards to avoid looking toward the back row. When she finally sat down, she risked a glance across the room. Layla sat at her own desk, staring straight ahead at the chalkboard. The space between them, once bridged by whispered secrets and shared notes, now felt like a vast, uncrossable canyon. Mia gripped the edge of her wooden desk until her knuckles turned white. She wanted to stand up, walk over, and say something, but her pride acted like a heavy, immovable wall. It held her in place, forcing her to look away. The teacher spoke, but the words were just noise. By recess, the change was even more pronounced. The playground, once a vibrant hub of shared jokes and running feet, felt hollow. Mia stood near the brick wall, watching the other children move in blurred groups. She walked to the spot where they usually played tag, but the ground felt empty. The laughter that used to echo against the walls was gone, replaced by the distant, muffled sounds of a world that no longer included them. Every minute felt like an hour, and the silence between them grew, heavy and absolute. Days stretched into weeks, turning the sharp sting of the argument into a dull, persistent ache. Lunchtime became the hardest hour of the day. Mia walked into the cafeteria, the noise of dozens of students hitting her like a wall of static. She moved to their usual table, but the space felt wrong. She sat down, her tray heavy with food she had no intention of eating. She stared at the empty chair across from her. It was just a piece of molded plastic, yet it held the shape of everything she had lost. She picked at her crackers, the dry texture catching in her throat. Every time the door swung open, her head snapped up, a flicker of hope sparking. She waited for an apology that never came, and she refused to offer one of her own. Her pride sat in her stomach like a stone. She watched the clock on the wall, its second hand clicking forward with agonizing slowness. The cafeteria was full of people, yet she was entirely alone. She looked down at her hands, gripped tight against the edge of the table, and realized she was trapped in a stalemate of her own making. The morning bell rang, but the seat across the aisle remained empty. Mia kept her eyes on her notebook, waiting for the familiar sound of a chair sliding back, but the silence persisted. When the teacher walked past, she paused, her hand resting briefly on the wood of Mia's desk. She leaned down, her voice dropping to a low, serious tone. "Layla is quite sick at home." The words hit Mia like a physical weight, pressing the air from her lungs. The classroom blurred. The memory of the torn page and the shimmer of tears in Layla's eyes played on a loop in her mind. She stood up, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. She did not wait for permission. She grabbed her bag. She pushed through the heavy doors and burst into the hallway, her feet pounding against the pavement as she sprinted toward the street. Mia reached the porch, her chest heaving. She gripped the railing, her knuckles white, and pressed the doorbell. The sound echoed inside, thin and sharp. She waited, her pulse hammering against her ribs. The door creaked open, moving slowly on its hinges. Layla stood in the threshold. She looked small, her frame swallowed by the folds of a thick, heavy blanket. Her face was drained of color, her movement sluggish. The sight of her friend, usually so vibrant and quick, hit Mia with the force of a physical blow. The anger that had fueled her for weeks evaporated, leaving only a hollow, aching clarity. Mia took a shaky step forward, her hands trembling as she reached out to steady herself. She looked at the floor, then up, meeting Layla's gaze. Tears spilled over, hot and fast, tracking down her cheeks. "I am sorry," Mia said, her voice cracking. "I was wrong. I let my pride get in the way of everything." Layla stood motionless for a heartbeat. She looked at Mia, her gaze searching the tear-streaked face before her. The stillness in the hallway seemed to pull tight, then suddenly relax. A small, genuine smile broke across Layla's face, softening the sharp lines of her fatigue. She let the heavy blanket fall slightly from her shoulders and stepped forward, closing the final few inches of space between them. She reached out, wrapping her arms firmly around Mia. Mia leaned into the contact, her own shoulders dropping as the tension of the past weeks drained away. They stood together in the quiet light of the hallway, the only sound the steady, rhythmic cadence of their breathing. The months of silence, the cold distance of the classroom, and the sharp memory of the torn sketchbook page all faded. Here, there was only the pressure of the embrace and the warmth of a friendship reclaimed. Layla rested her head against Mia's shoulder, her grip tightening for a moment before she pulled back just enough to look Mia in the eye again. No words were needed. The apology had bridged the canyon, and the space between them was gone. They remained there, anchored by the simple, physical reality, until the fading afternoon sun cast long, peaceful shadows across the floorboards. The rift was closed, the bond restored,